I'm excited for this amazing panel. Once again, I see some familiar faces. And of course, our moderator today is going to be Ben Harper as well, which I'm really excited about. So for Ben, as the Associate Director with Luxor Technologies, a Seattle-based digital mining services company, Ben helps build the software and financial services infrastructure to support the next generation of digital assets. I'm super excited to have Ben here, and Ben, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. So I think why don't we just start here with some introductions. I'll let all of my co-panelists here just kind of kick it off themselves. Emma, why don't you start?
Hi, everybody. My name is Emma Todd. It's so lovely to see so many familiar faces here with a full house. Good job, Koya. Good job, everybody. I'm particularly invested in this because I'm a board member of the CBC. I'm also the chair of their mining committee. I also have my own mining company. We are in Minnesota. We have 50 megawatts there. And I've been mining since 2018 and in this space since 2016. I am happy to be here.
Hi, Jason Budgell, Chief Financial Officer of Block Lab. We're based out of Labrador City in Newfoundland. Yes. I've been mining since about 2017. And we're still expanding.
My name is Sue. I'm with HUD 8. We're one of the oldest and largest Bitcoin miners in North America, and we are actually in the middle of closing a massive merger this week with a private miner south of the border. So excited to get into it.
Awesome. I'm Simon Raven. I have my own consulting business, Raven Energy Solutions. I work in the energy space most of my career and in the Bitcoin mining space the last few years, and we're focused on flare gas mitigation and working with energy companies to turn that into power and Bitcoin and digital assets. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So not everybody may be super familiar with digital asset mining, economics, so just kind of high level, this halving, what are we all kind of talking about? So there's a big dramatic event that's happening in our world next year, and this is the Bitcoin halving. And so this is the newly issued, what we call the block subsidy. This is newly issued Bitcoin that miners earn as revenue. That's going to be overnight cut in half. Think of an oil producer, the price of oil going down 50% predictably on a specific date. That's kind of what our industry is dealing with. Now, there is some positives, right? People see sometimes the potential for lower supply to mean the price of Bitcoin could go up. There's speculation that network difficulty, which is a measure of how many miners there are on the network and how many different parties you have to share those rewards with, might also drop as that number comes down and people become unprofitable. There's also some sentiment around transaction fees, which is the other income source for miners potentially going up. But essentially this is the outlook, is there's a certain halving that's coming. It's going to put pressure on the revenue of all of these different companies. But there are some potential opportunities. And so my first question, and why don't we start over at the end, Simon, how does a business prepare for something like this? How are you preparing for it, and how are you seeing other people in the industry prepare for this event?
I love how you started with the oil well analogy being kind of my background. I think it's actually very similar to how you run an oil and gas business. Lowest cost operator wins. And so I think you have to control your cost structure. Your revenue is guaranteed to drop by half if the Bitcoin price doesn't change. You can't control the price of the commodity. There's a lot of uncertainty over all the macro forces driving the set price of Bitcoin. But what can we control is we can control our operations, and we can control our input costs. Our company, personally, we're looking at flare gas, and so it's solving a pollution problem, but it's another huge benefit is it's basically zero input cost for fuel. So we make that into power, we run the gens or do the field operations. But fundamentally, control and minimize your input costs is a big driver. And then the other one, we're not in a position to do this as well as HUD 8 and others are, but have a robust balance sheet. The financial side of it, have staying power. I mean, that's huge, right?
So you want to jump in there?
I think for us, the number one thing we've been focused on is diversifying our fiat-based lines of revenue. So being less reliant on super capital-intensive self-mining past the highs and past the next halving, and looking at what are other ways that we can continue to serve this industry, participate in this industry, be a high beta opportunity for institutions who want to express an opinion on Bitcoin. Like right now, our beta is like 1.2 to Bitcoin, so we go about 20% in either direction of where Bitcoin runs. So yeah, focusing on diversification into some of the meaningful fiat-based upsides that we see has certainly been our strategy.
Jason?
Yeah, we've tried to keep the balance sheet as strong as possible. We've even branched into other lines of business. We're also an internet service provider. So we had to bring good internet to ourselves in Labrador, which wasn't really available. So because we had to bring good internet, we also started delivering internet to homes and businesses. So now we're the town's IT consultants. So we're trying just to keep all revenue sources available. And then of course, Bitcoin is still our bread and butter. And thankfully we have very low input power costs. So we're able to stay running even at the halving.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if you guys realize, as much as everyone's doing really well here, Jason's doing very well in Labrador, and I want to say thank you, because it's such a small community and you're really doing your best, and we really appreciate that, because at least one community can see how good Bitcoin mining is. We appreciate that. So from my perspective, almost everything everyone else has said here is what we're doing. So one of the things that we're doing is we were really good with our costs and our revenue, so we're trying to get really good miners right now, miners that are more cost efficient, better, that you can run better. So as you all know, if you placed an order, if you're in mining for the big main ones, they're behind schedule right now, so we're still trying to get the October batch, but we're really trying to get more cost efficient Bitcoin miners. We're trying to go to places where you can get really good power, because power is very important. Doesn't matter how good your equipment is, if the power isn't good, you might as well just stay home. So we're really trying to do that. We're trying to diversify. I'm sure we'll get into some of the places that we can diversify a little bit later, but it's been really, really interesting. As much as North America isn't quite in love with Bitcoin mining as much as we are, we're seeing some really good places around the world that we can go to where it's really, really efficient and just really, good for business in terms of costs.
Great answers, everyone. I think the key takeaway for me, at least, is this is a commodity industry. Controlling your costs, controlling your balance sheet. We're an interesting part in the crypto sector. I think there's lots on the payments, lots on the finance side, but when you get into the mining sector, it's really an industrial, it's really a commodity business, and the people up here understand that. On the technology, on the innovation side, yes, you want to keep your costs low, you want to have a strong balance sheet. Can you guys maybe talk a little bit more about, on the technology side, where are the areas that you're looking, that you're growing? Jason, I know you've been doing a ton with waste heat, and I'll kick it off to you to start to tell the group here, because that's one of the ways these companies survive, is not just competing on costs and Bitcoin mining, but using other parts of their process to find value in other areas and improving technology. So Jason, why don't you tell everybody about what you do?
Yeah, we like to say that we use the power twice. So we'll go into a large industrial building, we'll put in our Bitcoin miners as a source of heat. So essentially in Labrador, you need heat 11 months a year. So we're able to mine very profitably and also give a free heating source to these large industrial buildings. So we have a waiting list now of different locations that have very cheap power that we're able to now, again, use the power twice. And we're 100% hydro. So we're actually not burning any fossil fuels. We're probably some of the cleanest Bitcoin right now.
And kick it over to Simon, who mentioned some of the flare gas stuff, and people might not be aware here, but why don't you kind of just take people through the value prop of Bitcoin miners? Why are Bitcoin miners going to upstream oil and gas facilities? What's the opportunity for the company on the on the mining side, and what's the opportunity on the oil and gas side, and what's the kind of wider societal benefit here? Because I think it's one of our best stories as an industry.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'm still regularly having this conversation and working on the education component with folks in the oil and gas space. Because some get it, but many still don't, or they don't see it being worth their effort. And so the fundamental issue is you've got oil and gas sites, typically new fields, you're drilling new wells for oil. Gas comes up the well as well. Oil you can put in a tank and a truck and you can ship it to market. You don't need pipeline infrastructure in the field early days. Gas doesn't fit that criteria. You've got to put it in a pipeline and then flow it to market. And so ahead of all this infrastructure being in place, you've got all this gas that really the only solution is to flare it. So you're burning the natural gas, you're burning methane. Venting methane's hugely detrimental to the environment. It's, I think, 25 or 30 times more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So at a minimum, you've got to burn it, which will turn it into CO2 and mitigate the environmental impact. But you're burning all of this fuel, useful fuel that Canadians use to heat their homes, right? A valuable product. We also make many petrochemicals out of it. We're just wasting energy. And so these oil companies are wasting energy, which for them it's a pollution stream. Without the infrastructure, it's a pollution stream. There's carbon tax, there's flare limits from the government. This is a problem for these operators. And so a Bitcoin miner can come to site without the pipeline infrastructure. We can install a portable generator to turn that gas into electricity. And of course we plug in the container full of ASIC miners and Bitcoin computers and turn that into data. And then, you need a satellite link. Thank you, Elon, Starlink, we use it on all our sites, super effective. So it's this confluence of technologies that didn't exist a decade ago with mobile computer containers and satellite internet link and this novel invention of the Bitcoin network that allows you to take this stranded energy resource and monetize it. And it's, I think, a really good ESG story as well, because you're taking what's otherwise pollution and you're putting it to a useful end. And there's a whole other component here around grid stabilization as well. There's a ton of debate in Canada right now about net zero grids and grid stability. I think early days Bitcoin was really viewed as potentially a waste of energy by many. Why are we doing this new thing and we're using energy to do it? When you put it in a grid, it's the most interruptible, quickly interruptible load you can put on an electric grid, which is really powerful in offering those electrons back to businesses and industry and households. So a lot of really good tools there.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up the grid side, because Hut 8, I know, does quite a bit of that in southern Alberta specifically. Is that an area, that is a focus for Hut 8, or are there other kind of technology and innovation? Because I know you guys are at the forefront of high-powered computing, looking at AI. Like, what are the areas Hut 8's looking at?
So I agree with Simon that I think that miners as a complement to renewable grids, miners as a solution for methane mitigation, is the killer app for Bitcoin mining. Outside of even just oil and gas, if you even look at how mining can solve for the methane mitigation that happens with landfills. So most landfills, about 75-80% of landfills, are not connected or even close to any power grids. They're very far away from populations. And actually by law, there's something like 50% of landfills legally, globally, aren't allowed to be connected or used as power sources. And so this is where miners come in. We're incentivized to basically go anywhere where there's an internet connection and super cheap power, and effectively use that energy to mine Bitcoin. And so if you look at the landfill space, Daniel Batten is an ESG PM out of New Zealand who did a really great YouTube presentation. Reach out to me, I'm happy to send it to you, showing how, for example, in Haiti, there are hundreds of thousands of people living next to landfills that are emitting methane. And so for them to have a technology like Bitcoin mining to come in, and in fact, instead of suffering next to these landfills, getting sick, or having to parse through landfills to earn a living selling scraps, if you could set up mining infrastructure, they could earn Bitcoin, they could sell carbon credits, and effectively you can really use it to empower communities that have been marginalized by some of these incredibly pollutive industries. So I think for Hut, in this post-merger world for us, because we're in the middle of a merger, one of the pieces of business that we're picking up is called managed services, and it's effectively like the CBRE, JLL, enterprise infrastructure management services for any enterprises like oil and gas, like landfill operators who want to use mining for load balancing, methane mitigation, but don't want to hire the teams, don't want to procure the equipment, don't want to run the operations themselves. This is what that business addresses. We've currently partnered with 2 massive renewable power providers in the US who are using mining to balance their grids. And so, yeah, in terms of technology and new business lines, that's one of the ones that we have that we're really excited about that piggybacks off this trend that I think is incredibly bullish for the industry.
Yeah, thank you. And Emma, did you want to jump in? Get in there.
Okay, so one of the things that has the most methane emissions is, and you guys know, cattle. Cows. That's why they want everyone to go green and not eat cows, not eat meat. But I know there's some really interesting ways people are looking at doing methane reduction in terms of Bitcoin mining for that. Do you guys want to get into that a little bit? Because I think it's very interesting.
I don't know how you capture cow farts.
I know, right?
I'm actually unaware of this.
Bit of bedspread.
Like they're really trying hard. They're trying hard. It's kind of interesting to see some of we tried this and it didn't work, but we're trying this now. Because if they can do that, then it's really a good news story for everyone. And what we really want to showcase here is that Bitcoin mining can be the solution to problems that previously were out there. People didn't think that you could solve methane gas. It's a really big one, right? And for you guys who are having a hard time trying to understand it, when you watch movies and they show the oil production in the distance, you see that gas being flared off. That's it. That's what they're showing. So if we can find a really good solution to that, and we're saying Bitcoin mining can help with that, it's really good for all of us.
And just by show of hands, I'm kind of interested here because I think a lot of the popular narrative around our sector, at least, is use a lot of energy, bad for the environment. And I think a lot of these good news stories kind of go unheard in terms of reducing methane emissions, in terms of helping balance electricity grids, helping create demand for renewable energy. So just kind of like show of hands, how much of the audience has heard some of those kind of benefit points before? Or is this all kind of new information to everybody? So kind of like 50-50 split.
50-50?
Okay, which, I think everybody on the stage knows we have a lot of work to do in this country. So I'm going to start with you, Emma, because you're chair of the CBC's mining committee. I guess first question, what's the environment like in Canada, kind of regulatorily for miners specifically? I know we had some conversations before on the fintech side. And then what do we need to do to improve that, if you think so?
Okay, I'm going to heavily moderate my thoughts here. Okay, all right, so how do I say this diplomatically? We have work to do. There is no real love for Bitcoin mining from what I can see across all the provinces. So they started with a moratorium, and everyone feel free to draw me back, because I got a little bit heated on this one. So they had a moratorium starting in, I think, in one of the eastern provinces, where what they said was the next 18 months we were going to allow any kind of Bitcoin mining until we assessed what was happening. And then it became like a domino. It went from East Coast to West Coast, ending with my favorite, December 24th from BC, saying that they were also going to pause any kind of Bitcoin mining. So what could happen is if you had an idea for Bitcoin mining, you submit a proposal, they were not going to table any proposals for the next 18 months. And then what they then decided to do, or what we just saw 1 month ago, is that one of the provinces has said, listen, we want to make this permanent. We want to make this permanent because we see that while Bitcoin mining does generate jobs, it doesn't generate enough. We're not really seeing any ESG potential. We think it's just basically I'm getting started again here. We're seeing that, it's not, we think that we're just going to stick with, what we know. And also Hydro-Quebec basically has a moratorium in place right now where they're not allowing anything. So it's been really an uphill battle. We really kind of need to get out there and show them all the benefits that we can do. I was just in Washington yesterday, and I was there 2 weeks ago, and I had some senators asking me about that who really even had no interest from their state in Bitcoin mining, but they're people are asking us for votes, what do we do? And I'm trying to explain this to them. And it really is an uphill battle because, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, we go out there and we lobby and we talk about how good Bitcoin mining is, right? But the Bitcoin industry spent $22 million in lobbying last year. And the banks spent $22 million per quarter. So we really can't match them. So what we're trying to do is do a grassroots. We're trying to tell everybody here, have you guys go out and spread the word. We're just gonna have to be like David and Goliath because really we are doing good work here. We really want everyone to know that. And it's going to be an uphill battle, it already is.
Jason, do you think you can comment maybe on the provincial side, because this has been there's kind of two issues on the policy side for our sector in Canada. The first is a national, and it's a couple tax issues that really make the jurisdiction less competitive than it should be. But some of the more even challenging is on the grid side and the grid regulator side, putting these moratoriums. And specifically, they've been in Newfoundland, Labrador, Manitoba, British Columbia, Quebec. all around the same time last year. So you talk about kind of navigating that a little bit and what you think kind of the outlook is for educating these policymakers.
Yeah, unfortunately, I come from Newfoundland that doesn't like Bitcoin. We've kind of been dragging them kicking and screaming into the industry. We had to go, again, the route of bringing internet to communities, and we're actually in the process now of doing greenhouses and producing food. So we had to not use the word Bitcoin because it's a bad word in Newfoundland. So we talk about data centers and greenhouses and internet connections. So they support us kind of that way, but they're still very anti-Bitcoin, unfortunately. We're working our way through that, but because we are locally based and we are we're hiring every day, so they are giving us power, but they want other reasons for the power, greenhouses, so you can't use the word Bitcoin. I just try to say data center for everything.
I'm curious to ask a question on the panel back to you is, have you guys looked at cloud compute and AI and GPUs instead of Bitcoin mining to get around some?
Well,
at the end of the day, we're making power into data.
Yeah, no, we do all the IT services for the iron ore mine. So in Labrador, everything has to do with iron ore mining. So we're trying to help their industries thrive because Newfoundland will give them more power. So we'll just use their power twice and heat their buildings. So, but again, you have to be a traditional miner to get more power, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're definitely looking into AI and HPC computing. So one of the things that's really challenging for me is that when we say the governments really don't like Bitcoin mining, I'll give you an example that they illustrated in Washington State. Person had a warehouse. Half of it was used for Bitcoin mining, half of it was used for HPC computing. The part that was used for Bitcoin mining was heavily, heavily regulated. They didn't care about HPC computing. It was basically the same thing. But it's really just perception and and not to mention HPC computing has a lot of strong backers behind it. It's got Amazon, it's got Google, it's got Meta. So they're allowed to kind of get away with a lot more, whereas we are not. But HPC computing is kind of like the next thing, but it's not as easy as going from Bitcoin mining into HPC computing because different infrastructure, a lot more resources are needed in order to make it happen.
Cost, redundancy, latency,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm pretty encouraged. There's been some recent evolution to your technology question from earlier, Ben, around distributed node cloud compute for AI and HPC. That really wasn't there a few years ago. So as a small operator, I couldn't go run an AI data center. Well, for one, the demand for AI is ramping crazy, like in real time, right? But even cloud compute, I'm going to host a node for Amazon, and I go down, they're going to call and be, like redundancy and uptime is super important. So that's what's one of the things that's so powerful about Bitcoin is your node goes down, you don't get a phone call, no one's complaining, you don't have a customer that's mad. But the evolution in these distributed cloud clusters for AI compute, I think is really powerful because it can allow node operators, small or large, to be running data centers and feeding into these pools. That I think really, frankly, takes any existing Bitcoin operation. If you want to swap those out for GPUs and AI compute, you actually can do that more easily now and going forward. I think that's evolving really quickly in real time. I think you're going to see a lot more maturity in that piece of it over the coming years.
I think it also speaks to the theme that Bitcoin also speaks to in Luxor, which is democratization of access. Because if I'm, again, a smaller enterprise and I need render or whatnot, oftentimes some of these smaller cap companies or smaller enterprises can't afford the premium pricing that some of these hyperscalers charge to use their different iterations of compute. So that's where platforms like IO.net, even different projects like Render Network, where they solve for that problem of accessibility, which I think is great.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to ask, actually, following up on kind of Emma's point about that Washington data center. What's your experience in Canada? Like, is the are we seeing other types of data centers come under the same type of scrutiny, or is it very much specifically targeted at Bitcoin mining and that type of specific compute? Essentially, it seems like we're hamstringing our growth here on that side, but are we capping our growth too on just the broader data center and compute side?
I've seen very little pushback on compute, and a lot of pushback on Bitcoin. That's been my personal
experience. Compute as an industry just makes a lot of sense for this country, right? We have per capita a ton of energy. We have a whole bunch of issues getting it to market. And data centers and Bitcoin mining specifically are, in my opinion at least, a great opportunity for us because low price stranded energy is what miners are looking for, and cold, and it describes the country, right? It's what are the, I guess if you know, it's kind of a challenging environment in Canada, you know, where are your companies looking? Where do you see other companies looking to expand and invest, you know, going into the halving and coming out of the halving? Are there jurisdictions that are really sticking out right now? Is it kind of a wait and see till the environment in Canada improves? Or, you know, are you actively looking to move to other places?
So I'll take this one. We love Alberta. Alberta loves us, so we love them more. We also love Manitoba, and we love Quebec, and we love Newfoundland. They do not love us. They do not like us in the least.
So it's a learning process. We want to expand in Labrador. We're actively expanding in Labrador because we feel it is the best location to mine Bitcoin. It's cold, it's dry, it's 100% hydro. So for the environment side of things, it is, I guess, the cleanest Bitcoin, if you want to use that term. So there's no reason why to really go anywhere else. So we're hoping to hopefully alter the government's decisions in the long term.
Yeah, you have to talk about that. You want to go with the government, like.
Are you seeing any
Baby steps.
traction there? Can you talk to like how that dialogue is going?
Well,
are you
actually,
hopeful?
it's very productive. Again, on the data center side with the greenhouses in a partnership with Indigenous partners. So on that side of things, we're having a lot of success. Again, we brought internet to communities that were underserved, so that's given us a lot of benefit because again, these communities now consider us as an asset because we're bringing top quality internet to communities.
And so did you want to jump in? I know Hut 8 is going through a big merger right now, expanding into the United States. Did you want to talk about that? You know, is the United States kind of the jurisdiction of choice now, or is there other international jurisdictions that are interesting?
No, I would not say the United States is a jurisdiction of choice. It took us 10 months to convince regulators that this was a good idea, but they got there, which was great. I think what we're seeing internationally is places like Paraguay. Paraguay is looking really interesting, very, very cheap power, very accommodative government for sure. Paraguay, Argentina is looking a little more palatable now that there's a super pro-Bitcoiner president there. So yeah, I think those are the fair areas where we're seeing. Oh, and well, sorry, in the U.S., Texas is incredibly accommodating to Bitcoin miners. We have a great relationship with the grids over there, the ERCOT grid. But outside of Texas, I'd say, yeah, it's mostly South America where we're seeing a lot of opportunity.
And on the off-grid side, Simon, where you're a little more focused, how does that kind of look from a jurisdiction perspective?
Yeah, similar to Sue's answer. I mean, we're in the near to medium term hyper-focused on Alberta, so where all our connections are and where we have a kind of pipeline of stranded gas and flare gas that we can build onto. Taking that same theme, in some of my past life, I've got oil and gas connections in Argentina and in Venezuela. Politically risky places, certainly more so in Venezuela, but a lot of untapped gas resources. So I come right literally from the wellhead to power. I mean, we look at solar as well, but I look at more gas supply than electrons because we can make the electrons. And if you control the supply chain, you're going to lower your costs, right? And outside of having access to hydro, which is fantastic, I fully support that. I look for where can I get cheap stranded gas. And Argentina has one of the biggest shale gas fields in the world, called the Vaca Muerta, dead cow, much like the Permian Basin in Texas. So Argentina really is Texas South. The potential there for Bitcoin mining absolutely is.
What we didn't talk about is, besides South America, we're also seeing Africa. Africa is really big. What we're generally finding is that places where they're not as rigid, such as North America as well as Europe, they tend to be really good for Bitcoin mining. Places that have a little bit more ways to go in terms of financial inclusion, things like that. So South America, Africa is really, really big. I have a friend, Sue knows who it is. He picked up and he's been in mining since 2013. Picked up all his mining rigs, well, not all of them, but most of them, move them to Africa. What you're seeing there is not only are you getting really good rates, you're also helping the communities. And that is just an absolutely amazing thing to do. So you're helping these communities in the middle of nowhere. They're able to have power, they're able to have funds. It's just really a win-win solution for everybody.
And it's super interesting to watch. I'm newer to this industry than these experts up here, but just seeing how this sector just is like a magnet to where the cheapest, most stranded energy sources are all across the globe. Bitcoin computing, Bitcoin hashing, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really care where it's located as long as you have an internet connection. And so, companies like the ones up here are always scouring the globe for the most competitive areas. And it's just one of the most kind of fascinating intersections of energy and finance and technology all in one sector. So if you're not that familiar with it, I hope you take something away from that. Final question before we jump into questions from the audience here is more of just like looking forward, right? The block subsidy, as I kind of talked about before, and apologize for being the lingo, but this is the newly created Bitcoin, that's going to get cut in half. But there are other components that contribute to mining revenue, right? And one of those is the Bitcoin price. Lots of analysts may argue that a reduction in supply will cause the price to go up. Some people think that's wishful thinking. On the other side of it, you have difficulty, which is, again, a measure of how many other miners are there. Another thesis that's been thrown out is, as the halving happens, there will be unprofitable operations. Those will come offline, and everybody left standing will be a little bit better off. Everybody I've spoken to is going to be the one standing, is what they told me. But lots of other people are shutting off, is what I've been told.
Yeah, exactly.
And then finally, the kind of wild card is transaction fees, which with ordinals, which is sort of like an NFT market that's been developing, or protocol that's been developing on Bitcoin, we've seen elevated fees, which has contributed to miner revenue. So start with Simon, just kind of what are your views on those other three? We know the halving's coming, but on those other three, the Bitcoin price, difficulty, transaction fees, what do you see coming?
You're not going to make me guess a price and a date, are you? No, I don't know. None of us do. I focus least on Bitcoin price because there's so many macro elements, right? Political, ETFs, supply, demand, sentiment. Who knows, right? I'm not going to pretend I do. The ordinals ones and the transaction fees I find really interesting. There's growth in the use case for ordinals on the Bitcoin chain. I can see a lot of value in that. And certainly as a miner, I can see a ton of value in that being another source of revenue. The last couple of months, our small mining operation, the uptick in the percentage of revenue from that was material. Really quite surprised me, to be honest. So I think, maybe there's more ways as an industry we can promote the use of more on-chain ordinals on the Bitcoin network. That could be a material thing over time. Yeah. That's one thought.
Sue?
I just would echo what you said.
Ordinals.
Yeah.
We need the transaction fees, right?
Yeah.
Transaction fees, applications like the Lightning Network, greater adoption there would certainly be bullish as well.
Good. Jason, let's talk difficulty here for a second.
Difficulty,
Yeah.
I can see, of course, it's going to continue to increase. It's pretty much, I think it's more than double this year. So
Yeah, and
that's just a bullish call on the actual network. People are putting money into it, so it's always bullish. I look at Bitcoin as a bet against government's overspending. So unless governments stop overspending, which we're pretty much not going to happen, that's why I see the price action continuing to go up. Because again, as governments have record deficits, there's going to be the price is going to continue to go up.
And Emma?
I actually echo everything everyone just said here. I was just saying yesterday, no one's talking about ordinals, and you guys come along and boom, ordinals is really good. Difficulty is also a big thing. What we're seeing is, as we're getting into the halving, people are like, let's make as much let's make as much money as we can. Let's get as much Bitcoin as possible because we're not entirely sure we'll be able to operate after the halving. So we're seeing a lot of people buying equipment, really getting their, really diving in and mining a lot of Bitcoin, which is why you're seeing the difficulty go up so much. It's going to be interesting to see what happens after the halving. Like, will a lot of these companies still be able to function? Because I was in Texas last week, and just seeing what's out there and what's happening. Just it's a lot of power. It's a lot of power. So we went to Core Scientific, and I knew they were large, but they had 713 megawatts operational, another 296 megawatts coming online in the next 3 years, and that's just what they were telling the public. So it's a behemoth. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few years.
Perfect. Well, thank you to everybody up here. Let's go over to audience questions. I think we're 7 minutes left. We nailed the timing. Oh.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Hi, my name is Nicole. I work in media, and I'm wondering what the biggest discrepancy is right now between the understanding of what the capabilities and potential is for Bitcoin mining and what the general public seems to understand around this, because most of what I'm seeing is around it being an energy sucker and bad for the environment. And so 2 parts to that question. First, why the discrepancy? And 2, what do you want to see media reporting on when it comes to Bitcoin mining to at least alter or inform public perception?
So there's a report that was issued by the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance in 2021. And it's called the CCAF, and they themselves have actually come out and said, starting at the beginning of 2023, they actually issued a statement saying, you know what, some of this data may not represent the status quo, it may be incredibly outdated. And the media, though, continues to purport and reference those the facts from this report that they issued in 2021. So, for example, that report, obviously, they actually came out and said misstated just what percentage of fossil fuels are actually mining the network today. So, for example, in 2021, Kazakhstan had about 13% of the total global network hash rate. Kazakhstan is like predominantly fossil fuel. Today, Kazakhstan has about 1% of the total global Bitcoin hash rate. Also, the CCAF model did not include off-grid mining, it only included on-grid mining. And grids globally in general, regardless of what industry they're powering, have a problem with being more fossil fuel based. So that modeling did not include off-grid mining. And if you include on-grid and off-grid, it looks like the data shows that Bitcoin, the total global hash rate, is actually being powered by a little over 50% renewables, predominantly hydro. And so there's a new model that's been created by this guy, again, I referenced him earlier, Dan Batten, an ESG PM out of New Zealand. Bloomberg Intelligence came out in August and said, hey, this model's legit, we're gonna use this as our source of truth. But at least what we're seeing is that its media is still referencing that antiquated data, that antiquated information in a lot of their reports. And some fun facts, again, that some of the research shows now is that hash rate is up 475% over the past 4 years. The price of Bitcoin is up 163%. Total users is up 289%, but emissions globally have gone down by 9.4%. But I mean, try and get the Financial Post to report that. It's just not going to happen right now. But this is why we're here, continuing to push the actual data and dispel the FUD.
Totally. I'd like to jump in on that quickly. I think other thing media can do and we can all do is continue to try to educate Canadians around just energy literacy. Most people do not understand how these lights come on. Literally, I gave a talk last week at my daughter's elementary school around how is power generated? How does the power grid work? Most people don't know. No disrespect, right? It's just a piece of the infrastructure of our society that generally the general population doesn't understand. So it segues really into the feds and the provinces, quite frankly, bickering right now over net zero grids and clean energy regulations and grid stability and base load power. I'm not going to answer all these questions here, but how does a power grid work? Why is grid stability really important in our modern society? And how can an interruptible load like a data center actually be a really viable, important part of a modern electric grid? These things aren't just simple. It's not just push a button and electricity gets created. So I think broad awareness and education around that infrastructure and energy literacy is a big thing.
And if I could just jump in, I think that building on that, I think kind of the largest misconception, not just in the media, but it's a reflection of kind of the wider public, is there's a misconception that energy usage in and of itself is bad, which when you really understand these energy systems, you realize is not the case. There's tons of energy that is wasted, particularly electricity is either used or wasted. And so sometimes using that energy is good. And that can be hard, I think, for the general public to wrap their head around, right? If you're, up on an oil field reducing methane emissions, right, running that computer isn't bad because it's using energy, right? If a wind turbine or a solar panel can't get built because the economics are such that when the wind is blowing, energy prices come down or even sometimes go negative, and so there really is no investment case for why you would build that renewable infrastructure. Well, if you have a data center that can offtake that cheap power via price floor, all of a sudden using energy isn't bad. And so if I had to boil it down to one misconception that I think really hurts our industry, it's that all energy usage is bad, and it's false, and we need to work together to push against that.
Awesome. I think we have one more question here, just real quick.
Hey, thank you for great panel. We had the panel for regulation, so I just want to combine them somehow. And I just want to ask, you guys as a business owners of like mining farms and mining pools should follow the rules of the regulators in countries, like your business in Canada or USA or any other country. So one day if regulators says that you don't allow to mine these kinds of specific transaction, what do you guys want to do as a business owner of mining farm or mining pool? Thank you.
I don't think we're gonna see, at least not in North America, I don't think we're gonna see a situation where regulators shut it down. If you look at things like Factor BlackRock, Invesco, Wisdom Tree, Cathie Wood, they've all come to market with spot Bitcoin ETF requests. BlackRock's success rate for getting ETFs passed is like 99.8%, and they're the largest asset manager in the world. So I don't think that they would be putting that stake in the sand if there was any sort of sentiment that it could potentially be shut down. With respect to other areas in the world, like China, obviously China banned Bitcoin mining, but we still see 20% of global hash rate coming out of China. But so it's happening in people's basements or whatever. But yeah, so I don't think we're going to see a situation where we see regulators, at least in some of the top mining areas, shut it down. I think they've at least come to the point that they realize that there is, utility here.
Awesome. Just give them a round of applause.